Hi, everybody. It's Kyle here with Olivia, and we're just going to have a little conversation about inquiry and share it with you. So you'll be able to. Our intention is you'll be able to listen to it as a podcast or watch it as a video, and then Olivia is going to write up a little summary of the main points so that you can also read it if you like to. So here's Olivia, and she's going to start us off with a question.
Hi, everybody. One thing that's been coming up for me in my relationship is I'm just curious how to work this in with the people that are closest to me. Like, how would you go about practicing inquiry in your primary relationship or with your family?
Yeah, great. And we can even, like, it extends to every relationship, even business. As a matter of fact, I just got off a coaching call with somebody having a little business problem, and my immediate with one of their employees, and I said the first step is just to go into inquiry without trying to solve it or fix it, because until we really understand what's going on, is we're in dangerous territory. Because what our ego wants to do is solve the problem, and so far up until we've done inquiry, we're just seeing it through our own lens, our own assumption, and even our history and assumptions from the past. So really, like, we're coming to every conversation so jaundiced and so imprinted from what's happened in the past, is that we're projecting onto the situation. So inquiry is a practice. It's almost Zen-like. It's like, okay, I'm going to set all of my stuff aside, and before I take any action or before I project anything onto the situation, is that I'm going to understand it. And I'm going to understand it from the other person's perspective, which is just so critical. Because if I don't do that, it just generates in here, and it's crazy making, and I'm not really connecting with the other person or what the problem really is. So we start with inquiry, and we just say, I'm going to set my agenda, myself, all that aside. Okay, it's over. You stay over there for a bit, which isn't easy to do, right? But if we can get that kind of discipline for just a minute, is to take it over there. We set that over aside, and I look you in the eye and I say, hey, I really want to understand what's going on for you and what's present here. And you say, and I can say, I notice that it feels like there's a little tension between us, or I notice that, it's not quite, that our relationship doesn't quite have the energy that it had. Or I could say, I just heard this thing about what happened in the office or the practice today. And I was curious, like, what's going on? And so that's the just curious and wanting to understand, like, I don't know. That's the hardest leap, because our ego wants to be the one that knows, especially if we're in a leadership position, or especially if we're in a long-term relationship, is we want to project everything that we've interpreted from the past on it. So it's like a reset. I just get clear in myself. I set that all aside. And then I put my attention on the other person and say, hey, what's going on? How are you feeling? Or what's happening with you?
So what happens for me, sometimes I go into it with great intentions, and then, it's not happening in a vacuum. So I can get triggered. So what are the signals for myself that I need to step out of inquiry? I'm too triggered to really meet the person in curiosity.
Yeah, it's great. And, it's a practice, right? So it really is a practice that we have to get out of our old responses to things. But as soon as I'm emotionally triggered, when we talk about life at altitude, we get brought down to the base level of needs. And then, all relationship stops. We're not really relating to the other person. We're just relating to ourselves. And so, one of two things has to happen. Like when I offer people the talking stick exercise, which is kind of has a tight form or a tight container, you could say, so that we remember what we're doing. But even just casually, is if I'm emotionally triggered, I have to do one of two things: either call a timeout, or just consciously take a breath and just set my reaction aside. Because if I don't do that, all of a sudden I'm just triggered in emotions. And generally, if I get triggered in my emotion, especially if I'm the one that has a little higher capacity for inquiry, the other person doesn't have a chance but to get triggered. And then we're just dealing emotion to emotion. We're not really relating.
Yeah. Great. Let's see. So going beyond inquiry, sometimes I have things that I want to share with my partner, or I want to say to them. How do I set it up when it's not coming from inquiry, when it's something that I feel like I need to get off my chest? Obviously not when I'm triggered. I've dealt with my trigger, but it's something that I just lovingly need to share with them. What's a good way to set that up and go about that?
That's great. And even if you are triggered, that what we want to do is be articulate enough in our relationship where we have the model and say, something's coming up for me, and I could really use someone to hold space for it and just listen to it without fixing it or reflection unless I ask for it. And my first choice is to do it with you. Would you be available for that? So again, that's setting up the container, this kind of agreement around inquiry method. I think we're going to pause for just a second because I hear the garbage truck coming.
Okay, perfect. Put your headphones on and
yeah, we're just going to hang out here with the garbage truck, which is a regular feature of my Tuesday life. Anyway, back from the garbage truck. We're back now. And I was talking about having this conversation with our relationship where we actually have a place to go to, a context. I like to call it a container. That's a word I used. Is like we create a container for the conversation so that we understand what the rules of play are. And it's so helpful, instead of just casual conversation, is that we actually, hey, can you hold a container for me for a minute? And to set up so that we all know the game we're playing. It's kind of like soccer. As soon as somebody grabs the ball with their hands, we can say, oh, wait a minute, that wasn't the game we were playing. And then we can say, hey, let's stop and get back to the game we were playing. But then when we set up that container for conversation, for inquiry, where one person's holding space and the other person is sharing or expressing or all that kind of thing, then we know when the game has changed and we can say, wait a minute, I think we forgot, or we're just not able to hold the container right now. Let's take a pause and get back to it. So that's like the power of inquiry method. And it actually only takes one. But if I'm in a couple, I like it when it can take two, because then somebody else can hold space for me. But as far as holding space for somebody else, it only takes you to be able to hold space of inquiry for somebody else.
So let's say that you and I are in a relationship and I'm asking you to hold space for me and you're not in a place where you can do that,
right?
Or it's not something you're ever interested in holding space for. I'm just curious what happens in those situations.
Yeah, I mean, it's a good question. There's all sorts of different kinds of relationship to have. And I have lots of relationships that aren't that intimate and that serve me and can be fine. So having a relationship at altitude, what I call a collaborative relationship, both people have to be able to get outside of themselves to be able to have that. And it's actually what I call like real relating, because when we're really relating, you and I are creating something larger than ourselves, rather than just having a relationship to try to get my needs met, whether it's for sex or housekeeping or, or for, combining incomes or whatever it happens to be. My relationships, in general, at least the close ones, I like to have a larger purpose or intent for them. That's what I call the want for us. In fact, we're doing a special topic call on exactly that topic here after this blog. We're going to be talking about, how to create a want for us. And when we engage in that larger thing, it's an opportunity for all of us to get out of ourselves, get out of the self-consciousness. As long as my attention's on me, it really doesn't have much to do with the actual, what I call a relationship. It's more about how do I get my needs met in this situation rather than what are we trying to do together. For me, a real relationship is when we all get out of our own selves. Not that I don't need to get my needs met, but like that I've already set up a context to get my needs met. Now we're doing something larger than our individual selves. That's for me when real relating starts happening.
Beautiful. Well, thank you. And just for everybody who's watching, by the time this comes out, we will have already done the relationship call. It happened yesterday because this will come out tomorrow. But we would love to do more hot topic calls if you're interested. This one was called Relationships Awakening the Want for Us. If you are interested, we could always do another one in the future. Or if you have topics that you'd like us to cover on the blog, or have a hot topic call around, those are 2-hour coaching calls where Kyle has an opportunity to answer any of our questions and do one-on-one coaching with us in a group setting. Feel free to reach out. My email is olivia@inquirymethod.com. Well, thanks so much, Kyle, for this conversation. It was really lovely to hear, your reflections on relationship and how to cultivate healthy relationships and also relationships based on inquiry.
Thanks, Olivia. It's so fun to be here with you. And I love doing this together. It's like, it's an example of the want for us thing. It's like we created this want for us. How would it be fun to create a blog? And so then we both show up for that larger thing. Feels great.
Yeah. Thank you.
Have a great day.
You too.